Welcome to the channel, folks. My name's Shane. In today's video, I'm going to give you roughly 10 reasons why you should buy the Sony FX3 and roughly 10 reasons why you might want to give this one a miss. So there's two things about this video you need to know. One, I'm not a Sony fanboy, and two, I paid for everything in this video. None of it was free to the channel or a gift. I didn't get any discounts on it. I bought this and the Sony a7C and a few lenses on the same day. I didn't want to rush out my opinion on this because I'd like to use something for a while before I really start to realize, this is what I needed to know about it beforehand. So that's what this video will cover. It won't be overly spec heavy, but what it will be is a hands-on user experience from someone who purchased the camera. If this video is helpful or if you enjoy it, please leave a thumbs up. I appreciate that. And if you want to check out this camera, I'll leave some affiliate links in the description below. They help support the channel at no cost to you. Here we go. The first reason to purchase the Sony FX3 is image quality and codec. So we get the all-intra codecs, which make editing a lot easier, although the file size is a whole lot larger. We get 4K 100 frames per second or 120 if you're in the NTSC region. So you get some of the best slow motion that I've ever personally seen. So if you're a big fan of shooting slow-mo and you need that 4K 120, this is a really great choice. I shot a short film with the Sony FX3 recently, and its low light performance, slow motion, and image quality, especially in a dark lit situation, was exceptional. So I would have no hesitations recommending this to someone who wants to shoot in UHD and get optimal video quality. If shooting in 422 10-bit is important to you, this is a no-brainer. Number two, low light performance. I just touched on this, but it needs to be said again. This thing can basically see in the dark. So if you do plan on doing any type of low lit situational shoots, whether that's short film or you just want to take it into the downtown area of your city, you can get some really beautiful results. Even with a slower lens, the low light results are phenomenal. Now, I own a number of different camera systems, and there's no question about it, the Sony FX3 can see in the dark. So again, if that's important to you, this is a no-brainer. 3, the autofocus performance on the Sony FX3 is the best that I've ever used when it comes to eye detection autofocus. Sure, some of the lenses have some focus breathing, but that's not a problem of the camera. Alongside many of the other Sony systems, you can get great, reliable, and repeatable eye autofocus. So if doing stuff like this is important to you, whether or not you're wearing a hat or not, or sunglasses, then you're going to get great results out of the Sony FX3. So eye autofocus on Sony is probably the best in the business. Interestingly enough, while the eye autofocus is amazing, I generally find myself using manual focus for B-roll for products because it doesn't always get what I want in focus reliably. But when it comes to eye autofocus, this is really amazing. Ergonomics and comfort. Now, this is a really interesting one because this won't be for everybody, but the shooting experience with this is very different. We get the joystick on the top. We also get a record button right next to it and a record button on the front of the camera, which is something that I really like. And having those tally lights makes the shooting experience a little bit easier, especially if you're in front of the camera. My favorite thing about this is the grip. The grip in the right hand probably is the best out of all of my camera systems alongside the Panasonic S5. I would say they're about even in the right hand. While there's a lot of 1/4-20 mounting points on the camera itself, I think it really shines once you add a cage. So if that's your plan, you're gonna love this camera. Maybe my favorite thing about the Sony FX3 is that it has very low rolling shutter. It's right up there with the Panasonic GH5 and GH5S, which is fantastic. So if you're used to shooting micro four thirds and you want a camera that has great image quality and very low rolling shutter, then this would be the camera to buy. I know as of shooting this, there's many other options from Sony on the market, but I don't think any have as low rolling shutter as this and the A7S III. Let's talk about the color profiles on the Sony FX3. One of my favorites is no picture profile. I don't think that gets enough love on the internet, especially on YouTube. Everyone's talking about S-Cinetone, which also looks fantastic. I use S-Cinetone for shooting short films, and I use no picture profile for shooting all of my YouTube videos because the skin tones and the color science looks great straight out of camera. Now, if you want to do any type of really heavy grading, of course, you can use S-Log2 or S-Log3 for the most dynamic range and flexibility in post. But overall, straight out of camera, you can get great results without having to do a lot of work. One of the most important things to any decent video is having really great audio quality. Some would say it's more important than the video quality, and I would agree. You could shoot this type of video with a cell phone or a GoPro. As long as the audio is good, people will still sit and watch. So the audio preamp directly in the camera, the 3.5mm input jack sounds great. I've had no problems with it whatsoever. I also love the fact we get the included XLR Audio Adapter. The XLR adapter has mixed reviews online. I think the audio quality of it's good. I just think it's a little bit too big, but I'm going to put audio quality in this because you can run an XLR microphone directly into the adapter that comes with the camera and get really professional results. For those who shoot a lot of handheld work, there's three things to love about the Sony FX3. One, the active steady shot system is really good, although you do get about a 10% crop, but I don't find that to be a deal breaker whatsoever. Secondly, it fits nice and easily on a gimbal, thanks to the compact nature of the body, and paired with the right lens, it can be a nice lightweight option compared with a lot of other camera systems. And thirdly, you can just leave the stabilization off and stabilize everything in the Catalyst Browse software or the Catalyst Prepare software. Now, there is a subscription service for that, and if you use the free version, it downsamples all of your nice tasty 10-bit footage to 8-bit, so just keep that in mind. If you plan on doing any type of serious stabilization with Catalyst Browse, you'll need the full version. And lastly, I'm a massive fan of the zoom rocker system on the Sony FX3. This is one of the only cameras, maybe the only camera from Sony that has this feature. This allows us to put a prime lens on and then get a digital zoom up to 1.5 times. So I've got a 24mm f1.4 on here right now, the G Master. It will turn that into a 35mm or anywhere in between just by using the zoom function over here, and it gives us nice smooth zoom functionality. It's not at the mercy of your stabilized hands, for example. You can just use this and it will give you great results. Welcome to my local park. It's absolutely beautiful here today. There was some dust on the sensor, so I fixed that as well. There shouldn't be any more blotches in the sky, fingers crossed. We're going to start by talking about the reasons why you might want to give the Sony FX3 a miss. This is one of the reasons why I don't own multiples of them. The price. These are really expensive. In Australia, you can buy almost 3 Panasonic S5s for the price of the Sony FX3. And in many ways, this has more options, but in other ways, it also has some crops in 4K mode that you don't get on the Sony FX3. But it gets you about 90% of the way there, and in comparable frame rates like 422 10-bit at 25 or 30p, they're almost indistinguishable. But the reason why you want the FX3 is for that super reliable autofocus, whereas the Panasonic S5 is a bit more like a filmmaker's camera. So if you're spending most of the time behind the camera and you can't justify the price of the Sony FX3, the S5 would be my recommendation. Sony call the FX3 part of their cinema line, but there's a lot of cinema tools and also aspect ratios missing from this camera. I would have loved to have seen DCI 4K being added with true 24 Hz as an option, but as it stands, we don't get either. There's also no filmmaking tools like vector scopes and waveforms. So you can't just set vector scopes up on a custom function button like I can with my S5, which means I don't really see this being used by a lot of professionals who are making films. Now, if you're making some sort of commercial for the web, this is a fantastic camera. You might not even need a lot of those tools because the camera handles everything really well, but I see this more as a run and gun, straight up auto mode kind of camera over something that's going to be used in a more professional setting. One of the biggest criticisms I have of this camera, and it was something I knew full well going into it, is that there's no EVF. And I found on a number of occasions I've missed having one, whether that's just to review the footage or just to double check my settings on a bright sunny day. There's nothing worse than trying to use this flippy screen when it's full sunlight. It's really, really tough. Now, if you plan on rigging this up, odds are you might not miss the EVF, but if you use it whatsoever on your current camera, odds are you'll miss it. And I found myself sometimes going to use it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, no EVF. So if an EVF is something you use at all, I would say go for the Sony a7S III instead of this. This next point isn't really a criticism of the camera per se, it's just something to think about if you want to go for this or the Sony a7S III. So one of the things I underestimated was how much extra storage I would need, especially if I start shooting 4K 120. So a little while back we did a shoot at a shop and it went for about an hour and a half or so, and I was shocked I nearly chewed through both of my storage cards that I had in here. It's just unbelievable how much bigger 4K 120 is, which kind of brings me to my point. If you keep all of your files on an external drive or on a NAS server or something like that, you're going to chew through storage far faster than you might have otherwise if you just shot in 1080p at 120 frames per second. So keep that in mind. You get all the beauty of those 4K 120 shots or 100 frames per second if you're in the PAL region, But then all of a sudden you need far more storage to store them, and you need a more robust computer to edit all of this. So if you've got an old computer, I'm gonna tip you may actually struggle editing the files out of this camera. If you've got one of the latest iMacs, or if you've got a high-end PC that can handle DaVinci, you'll be fine with this, but it's just food for thought. I'm just throwing this in because I underestimated how much more demanding some of those file types would be, even on a new computer. Let's quickly talk a little bit more about the audio adapter. So while we get great XLR inputs and the audio quality is superb, there's a lot I don't like about it, starting with the sheer size of it. Now, this is a handle that's supposed to be used for run and gun filmmaking, but because of its size and shape, it doesn't easily fit into a camera bag, especially if you've got a couple of lenses with you or another camera with a lens already attached. You need something else to carry it with. So that's my first complaint. Secondly, there's no cold shoe mounting point anywhere on the handle, which means you need to buy a small rig accessory to get even a wireless pack attached to the handle. This is a huge oversight in my opinion, but let me know what you think. And thirdly, for whatever reason, and it's probably a proprietary reason, Sony make the shotgun microphone clamp extremely wide. It's just far too big. I own a number of shotgun microphones from a number of different companies and they're all way too loose. I have to go ahead and get on Amazon and order like a rubber cylinder that I can then put on the microphone. So I just don't know why they do this. It's really infuriating, but odds are maybe it fits their own brand. I've just got back from Hawaii shooting again with another camera system, and the one thing that I always find I'm missing on a Sony FX3 is some sort of tangible top dial to switch mode. So if you're shooting in S&Q mode and then you go back into regular mode, you have to use the mode button on the back here and then cycle through the menus on screen. Now, not the end of the world, right? But you got to make sure that you remember to switch it back. On even the Sony A7C, I can see that I'm in movie mode as opposed to S&Q mode. The top dial makes it quick and functional, but you just have to make sure you're in the right mode when you start shooting. One of the things I've done for years when it comes to shooting with Panasonic cameras, on the bottom of the battery door, there's a secondary door that allows you to insert a dummy battery and then close the door on the battery compartment and then just run it on power all day. But the FX3 doesn't work like that. You can run it off dummy batteries. There is some sort of support for it, but if you have a dummy battery in there, you can't close the door because there's no secondary cable door here, which means you have to power it over USB-C. Now, I did a full video about this, so if you plan on buying one of these, check out my video. I'll link it up in the cards. It's a problem that you can work around, but it's a very different problem to, say, using a dummy battery, which I feel is a more long-term reliable solution over putting continual use on a USB-C port in the camera. That's just my 2 cents on it. I just wish this battery door also had a door for the cable. At the end of the day, the Sony FX3 is an extremely powerful camera. While it doesn't have all of the features I would have loved to have seen included, what it does extremely well. For me, I purchased it for low light performance, eye autofocus, and just the ability to hand it off to my girlfriend if she's helping me with the shoot, to hit record, and I don't have to worry about anything. And if that's the situation you're in, it works extremely well. Or you might not like any manual intervention on a camera at all, but I kind of find it boring to use myself, but I love the end result, and that's what it comes down to. So if you're looking for a camera that kind of takes the headache out of getting great results, you can't go too far wrong with the Sony FX3. It's kind of how I feel about the Sony A7C. It might not have 10-bit codecs and all the fancy modes, but it allows you to get really good results, gives you great dynamic range, and at the end of the day, if the content's good, that's all people are going to watch anyway. So thanks again for watching. Let me know what you think of the Sony FX3. If you want to check them out, I'll link them down below. Thanks again. Catch you soon. See ya. Ooh, sweaty.